Well, welcome viewers, Dr. JWA, theologist since 1994. Tickle versus Giggle, behavioural-constitutional analysis, episode 5, when fear became a tool of institutional stability. The rain falls harder tonight. Inside the train carriage, passengers sit beneath fluorescent light, scrolling silently through headlines, policy dates, HR notifications and institutional statements, carefully explaining what language remains safe to use publicly. Nobody raises their voice. Nobody creates conflict. The country still outwardly appears calm, but psychologically, another atmosphere has begun consolidating beneath ordinary Australian life. Fear increasingly functioning as a mechanism of institutional stability. And that is the deeper exposure underneath the Tickle versus Giggle conflict, not merely legal reinterpretation, behavioural conditioning. Because once institutions progressively discover they can regulate populations through reputational fear, semantic uncertainty, procedural intimidation and psychological exhaustion, overt authoritarianism becomes unnecessary. Citizens begin regulating themselves voluntarily. The corporate employee attends another mandatory inclusion seminar while silently calculating which questions could destroy future promotion pathways. The teacher carefully avoids biologically direct terminology despite privately recognizing observable reality. The father lowers his voice discussing the issue at the table because his children now repeat institutional language back into the household itself. That intergenerational pressure matters, because the strongest totalitarian systems are not the ones requiring constraint, visible enforcement. They are the ones where populations begin internalizing institutional fear deeply enough to enforce compliance against themselves, their families, and eventually one another. And that is the soft authoritarian threshold modern societies rarely recognize while crossing it. The Tickle versus Giggle ruling intensified a growing national perception. Institutional systems increasingly possess power not only to regulate conduct, but to determine which recognitions remain socially legitimate inside public life itself. And viewers, that psychologically destabilizes populations because human beings require stable meaning, observable continuity, truthful speech, relational trust, and coherent reality structures to remain psychologically integrated. But once citizens begin learning perception may require suppression, honest recognition may create institutional risk, language may require ritual performance, and disagreement may threaten livelihood, the nervous system slowly reorganizes around adaptive fear instead of truthful stability. And that produces chronic vigilance, social distrust, internal fragmentation, emotional fatigue, learned silence, and behavioural dependency upon institutional approved structures. The constitutional danger becomes severe once fear itself starts preserving social order more effectively than truth, because populations psychologically conditioned by reputational threat eventually stop asking, "Is this true?" and begin asking instead, "Is this survivable to say?" That transition marks the beginning of civilisational deterioration, and this is happening in Australia. The train moves deeper beneath the city while government announcements echo mechanically through fluorescent silence. Passengers stare downward into illuminated screens as though public life itself has become emotionally procedural. And beneath the outward continuity, another reality quietly expands. Institutions progressively stabilizing themselves through behavioural fear adaptation, rather than constitutional legitimacy grounded beneath higher restraint. And that is why the atmosphere increasingly feels psychologically suffocating, because once authority begins operating without meaningful recognition of moral, biological, constitutional, or divine limits above itself, power naturally expands toward administrative ownership over language, thought boundaries, social legitimacy, behavioural permission, and eventually reality interpretation itself. And that is the deeper theological fracture underneath the modern institutional condition. Divine disavowal. Divine disavowal. Because constitutional inheritance originally assumed truth existed independent of government, human authority remained morally limited, and institutions answered to higher sovereign reality beyond themselves, and in Australia, that is gone. But once systems progressively enthrone themselves as final arbiters of truth, meaning, and recognition, institutional fear inevitably replaces constitutional freedom as the mechanism preserving social order. The carriage door open again, nobody speaks, the passengers quietly exit beneath flickering fluorescent light, while the city continues functioning apparently normally above them. Yet beneath the procedural stability, another truth steadily grows. A civilization governed increasingly through adaptive fear eventually stops producing psychologically free citizens. It produces behaviourally compliant populations instead, and that's what ends civilizations.